I appreciate it. Suhari, with a connection to the former emperor, could not be wholly ignored. Thank you very much. Lulan bowed her head again and took Shenmei's hand. The deformed nail caps were still clinging to it, barely holding on. Lulan stuck the nail caps onto her own fingertips. At the same moment, Jinchi thought he sensed someone nearby. Basin and the others had finally realized he was missing. They had eventually succeeded in finding the hidden passageway. Did Lulan realize they were coming? My second wish, then. She reached out toward Jinchi, stretching her hand toward him. The hand was decorated with the long nail caps. She seemed to be moving very slowly. He could easily have dodged her if he had wished to. And yet Jinchi did not move but accepted it. The terrible nail cap bit into his cheek, tearing skin and flesh. A few drops of blood flew into his eye. He squeezed it shut, but with his open eye he looked at Lulan. Thank you very much, she repeated and bowed for the third time. She did what her mother could not do before death, and she scarred the face Shenmei so often reviled. It might seem a pointless act now, but it sealed Lulan's fate. I wonder if I could be an even better actor than father, she quipped. Then she turned to look at Shenmei. Dear mother, I have done everything I can do. She still smiled as she opened the door across from them. Blowing snow filled the doorway. They were on the roof of the fortress. Lulan twirled out the door, her sleeves waving and black hair flying. Dancing snowflakes surrounded her. Basin and the others were in the narrow passageway, looking for their moment. Basin, his eyes full of fury, leapt forward. He hardly understood what had happened. When Lulan was sure he was in the room, she raised her long nailed fingers high. Even in the faint moonlight, you could see the blood on them. Lulan had blood streaks on her face, and she almost appeared to float above the snow. Jinchi was behind her with a fresh wound on his cheek. Suddenly, Lulan laughed loud and long. Ah, ha 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 ha. Her voice rebounded off the snow. She sounded wild, but in her eyes you could still see her sanity. The faces of Basin and his companions turned to sheer fury. The light had gone out of Shenmei's eyes. It seemed she reaped what she had sown. Suhari, still trembling, stretched out her hand, but she could not reach Lulan. Jinchi could do nothing but witness Lulan's last moments, clutching the piece of paper she had given him. In the snow, her sleeves flapped and her hair whipped around her. Her laughter was suddenly accompanied by the crack of gunshots. Lulan continued to dance even as the bullets brushed past her sleeves and grazed her cheek. Finally, Jinchi was sure this was her stage. All those around her were merely supporting actors drawn into her performance. The rear palace was a stage, and the country itself was too. Perhaps she saw her role as the villainess who would overturn them all. If her father Shishu had been a tanuki, then perhaps Lulan was a fox. After all, in the stories, the villainess who caused a country's downfall always turned out to be a vixen. Lulan continued to dance lightly along. How could she move so delicately among the deep snow? The soldiers stopped abruptly, more focused on firing their fafer than on pursuing her. Should he have stopped her? No, he could not. He could not disrupt the performance of the greatest villainess of her time. He could not even look away. Another shot, how many had that been? Then there was a thump and Lulan stopped moving. The unmistakable nose-prickling smell of fire powder drifted through the air. The bullet had hit Lulan in the chest. She reeled backward and pain spread over her face. Arrest her, Basin shouted to his men. To Jinchi, the idea seemed repugnant. It was not the wrong thing to do. He felt as though someone had revealed the ending of a story he was enjoying. A smile returned to Lulan's twisted face. Then it disappeared again, or it only seemed to disappear. She had tumbled backward and there was nothing behind her. The fall from the roof was the last he saw of Lulan. His body felt impossibly heavy, as if all the fatigue of the past several days had finally caught up with him. They had just gotten out of the stronghold when they linked up with a reserve unit. Someone then provided first aid and stitched up his cheek. He was the one receiving the stitches, but why did everyone else look so pained by it? Was it because he had gone without anesthetic? They saw Gaeshun once more, and he told Jinchi to get some sleep. Gaeshun was certainly there. The story went that Jinchi had been with the rear unit the whole time, so Gaeshun needed to be seen there as well. Actually, Jinchi was just now realizing he hadn't really slept for several days. How is the girl? She is fine, so you should go sleep. Did he really look so tired? Perhaps he did, but he could not bring himself to rest. Gaoshan, clearly sick of Jinchi's stubbornness, pointed at a carriage. He recommended keeping your distance. Jinchi promptly ignored him and entered the vehicle. There he discovered a diminutive young woman. She was soot-stained and blood-stippled, lying asleep on top of several blankets. She was curled up like an infant, which made her look even smaller than she usually did. She was surrounded by a collection of objects wrapped in white cloths. These are the dead children of the Shi clan, Gaoshan explained. Why is she sleeping with them? You know it's impossible to talk her out of something when she gets an idea in her head. He was right. This young woman Maomao had a distinct stubborn streak. Was there some reason she wanted to be there? She looks awful. Speak for yourself, sir, Gaoshan said, grimacing. It pained Jinchi to remember seeing Gaoshan beating Basin when they returned. Jinchi had been injured, and he knew a soldier who failed in his duty must be punished. But it was only because Jinchi had agreed to the wish of that vanished vixen. She said, forget about me. In any event, you made the right choice not to let the strategist see her. Jinchi heard that the man had not made a very graceful landing when he leaped out of the carriage. He had injured his back and could not take a step on his own. Jinchi climbed into the carriage. Wait outside, Gaoshan nodded slowly. Jinchi looked at Maomao's face. There was blood on it and her left ear was swollen, even though it had been smeared with ointment. None of this would have happened to Maomao if she had not gotten involved with him. The thought made his heart ache. She had no injuries besides her ear, but he could see a dark bruise on her neck. Had someone hit her? And the blood must have come from somewhere. Slowly, Jinchi reached out his hand. And then, excuse me, Master Jinchi, but may I ask what you're doing? Maomao looked at him just as someone might try to drive away a nasty little housefly. Chapter 22. In the clutches of the fox. When Maomao opened her eyes, she found a lovely nobleman in front of her. For some reason, he was leaning over her and reaching toward her collar. She gave Jinchi a glare, causing him to exclaim, well, stumbling over his words and waving his hands as if to protest his innocence. Normally, she might have held the glare a little longer, but she could not help noticing a bandage on his face. Master Jinchi, what is that? She asked, straightening her collar. It is nothing, a graze. He tried to hide it with his hand. Maomao looked annoyed. Let me see it. It is hardly worth showing to you. That, of course, only made Maomao more interested. She pressed forward, leaning toward Jinchi so fast that he backed up slightly. When she finally had him with his back to the wall, Maomao reached out slowly. She was silent for a moment. His face, usually perfect, now had a wound. It was mended with stitches that ran diagonally down his right cheek. The wound was more than just a scratch. Something had torn through the flesh. The stitches were uneven and should be redone as soon as possible. Maomao would have liked to do it herself right then. However, her hands were shaking with immense fatigue. She said, you were in the fighting. He replied, I could hardly sit back and watch while others put themselves in danger, could I? She asked, why not? You are important enough. Her annoyance was beginning to show in her tone. She wished he wouldn't go running into danger. If he got himself hurt, it would only cause trouble for everyone around him. He scratched his head and smiled somewhat bitterly. Yes, I confess it was most unfair of me to do that to Basin. It is surprising how strong Gaoshan can be when he wants to. He began awkwardly to reattach the bandage, but Maomao took it from him. I certainly didn't intend to get hurt, Jinchi said. Who does? It's just... Someone made a most unusual request of me. He wrinkled his brow. Sadness was in his obsidian eyes. Were you close with Lulan? The question seemed rather abrupt. Relatively, Maomao said. Were you friends? I'm not sure I know. She really didn't. She had thought the relationship had been something close to friendship, or at least it had felt like it to her. But as for what Lulan had thought, she could not say. Chatting with Zyrolan and Lulan, or rather, Shisui, had not been such a bad feeling. There were many things I did not know about her. The same, it seems, was true of me. The pain on Jinchi's face intensified, and now we have lost the chance to understand her. Maomao took his meaning. I see, sir, of course. Maomao had known this would be the outcome. When Shisui left that room, she had entrusted something to Maomao. Then she went out knowing she was to meet her destiny. All Maomao could do was honor what had been entrusted to her. Master Jinchi, do you not want to rest? Yes. I really am terribly tired. His complexion was not good. Jinchi was probably in far worse shape than Maomao, even though she was the one who had been kidnapped. He had unmistakable bags under his eyes and his lips were dry and dull. The obvious thing would have been for him to return to his own carriage and sleep, but to Maomao's amazement, he lay down on the pelt in her own vehicle. Maomao let her frustration show on her face. "I must ask that you not sleep here, Master Jinchi." "Why not? I am tired. Surely I shouldn't have to explain." Maomao looked around. There were 5 bundles in the carriage with them, the children of the Shi clan. "This place is impure, I am aware of that." Then why, before she could finish speaking, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her close. His hand felt very cold. They found themselves lying facing each other on the animal skin. "Then why are you here?" "Even I know to take pity on children," she said, reciting the words she'd rehearsed. "Do you?" "I wonder." Jinchi remained lying down and tilted his head. "Didn't your teacher of medicine forbid you from touching dead bodies?" She fought the urge to scowl openly, cursing him for remembering that. Considering he felt the need to issue such a strict rule, "I don't think you would last very long in a place like this," Jinchi said. He had a knack for sensing things at the most inconvenient moments. Maomao tried to figure out how to avoid the intense stares focused on her. As she was lost in thought, Jinchi reached for her again. He adjusted the collar of her garment. "And what happened to you?" he asked, frowning. A dark, ugly bruise marked the skin under her collar, a result of Shenmei hitting Maomao with her fan. Maomao felt a little embarrassed, but she decided it would be best to move things along promptly. "I met someone who was not very nice." "You were attacked," Jinchi said, his voice icy. "It was a woman," Maomao made sure to add. Jinchi seemed awfully concerned about everyone else's chastity. She flinched as he ran his fingers along the bruise. "Do you think there will be a scar?" "What from this?" "It will be gone before you know it." Feeling uncomfortable with his fingers on her skin, she backed away. However, Jinchi reached out farther. Finally, Maomao sat up and straightened her collar. "Don't go getting a scar," Jinchi said. "I could say the very same thing to you, sir." Jinchi frowned. "I am a man, what does it matter to me?" "Oh, you are quite beyond simply a man, as if I cared." "Then I do not care either. If one scar is enough to obliterate my value, then so be it. And after you gave me such a piece of your mind." Jinchi did not sit up, but he did not let go of Maomao's wrist either. Some of the warmth was beginning to return to his hand. He asked, "Am I such that one scar would obliterate my value?" His hand tightened on her wrist. "Am I nothing more than my face?" Maomao instinctively shook her head. "Frankly, a small scar might do you good," she said, perhaps more honestly than she intended. Jinchi was very beautiful. He often made those who saw him feel a little unsettled. People around him tended to focus too much on his appearance. Maomao thought he wasn't as flowery and delicate as he appeared. She believed he was made of sterner stuff. In her opinion, only a few people around him truly understood that. She said, "Don't you think it makes you look more manly than before?" She noticed his lips tighten when she said that. He looked around uneasily, blinked and shook his head. "What's the matter, sir?" Jinchi scratched the back of his neck with his free hand. "Considering the circumstances, I thought maybe I would simply grin and bear it. No need to bear anything. If you are tired, hurry up and get out of here and rest." That is what she had been about to say, but it seemed sleepiness was not what Jinchi was trying to endure. He pulled on her wrist again. When she sat down facing him, he grabbed the upper part of her other arm. "When I looked at your injury, I meant to act as calm as I could," he said. His unsettling face moved closer to hers. She could feel the heat of his breath on her skin. "I'm surprised," he said. "I mean, I think I seemed calmer than I expected." Huh, at that moment she remembered. They had been in a situation much like this one before, hadn't they? And hadn't it been rather compromising? Her back was pressed to one of the carriage's support posts. She had nowhere to run. "Master Jinchi, hadn't you better get some sleep? I am still all right." How could he say that with those giant bags under his eyes? "I will re-stitch your wound, sir." "Let me go get some painkillers. I can live with it another half hour." Another half hour indeed. Jinchi ignored her. Maybe the fatigue made his eyes look like a feral dog's eyes. This isn't good. She twisted and pulled, but he was stronger than she was. Jinchi kept getting closer and closer. When their noses were almost touching, there was a clatter. Jinchi all but jumped into the air. What was that? When he realized the noise had come from where the children were resting, he looked even more stunned. That was perfect for Maomao. She shoved past him and toward the source of the sound. She felt the wrists of the swaddled children one by one. No. No, she thought. Then she felt the wrist of the third child, the small lips fluttered. There was an almost imperceptible hush of breath. She found a pulse, faint but detectable. If only these little ones were bugs, Shisui had said, they might have been able to sleep through the winter. Those insects that made the bell-like sound, the females ate the males, and then they died as well. Only their offspring survived, hibernating through the cold months. Shisui had compared her clan to insects, and she had given Maomao one other clue. There was another country where the drug was sometimes used in secret practices. It could kill a person and then bring them back to life. The drug killed them with poison, but with time the poison dissipated. When it was completely neutralized, the dead person was revived. Suhari had taught Maomao about the resurrection drug. Had that been part of Shisui's plan too? Jinchi asked from behind her, but Maomao did not have time to answer his question. She was massaging the children's bodies, desperately hoping the resurrection effect would work. That was the whole reason Shisui had brought her here. Maomao did not know what Jinchi would do with the revived children, but she did not have time to explain, either to herself or to them. Hot water, Master Jinchi, please get some hot water, and something to warm them up. Clothes or food, it doesn't matter. Let the dead lie, Jinchi chuckled. She got me, the vixen got what she wanted. Master Jinchi, Maomao shouted. He seemed to be muttering to himself, but she didn't have time to care. Yes, of course, he said. She could not shake the impression that there was almost a cheerful tone to his voice. His expression was much softer than it had been earlier. It still carried some disappointment, though. Maomao was focused completely on the children, who were slowly starting to breathe again. When Jinchi returned with blankets and a bucket of hot water, he leaned over and whispered in her ear. He asked, "Can we continue this later?" "Sure, whatever," Maomao replied. She was too busy to think much about it. She had the little ones to worry about. Epilogue. The capital was in an absolute uproar that day. The emperor had finally taken an empress, and at the very same time a new crown prince had been presented. The celebratory atmosphere, building on the anticipation of the new year, even reached the pleasure district. The young apprentice girls were beside themselves with excitement. The empress's name was Gyukayu, and the crown prince was her son. The child had been delivered safely. As joyous as that was, it also meant Maomao was now without an occupation. So we find her back in her tumble-down apothecary's shop, grinding herbs. "Yo, Freckles, how about a snack?" A boy, young enough that his voice hadn't changed, opened the door and came in. His name was Chu Yu. He was a brat of a kid with a gap in his front teeth. They had abandoned his old name. The fact that his new one sounded somewhat like it was a tactic of desperation. The boy seemed to have a faint memory of what he was once called. It was clear to see that he was still unruly. However, he had only been able to get up and about a few days earlier. He had been in a sort of sleepiness until then. It was impossible to say if his youth or simple good luck allowed him to be this active again. Eventually, all 5 of the children had revived. Maomao did everything she could to keep them breathing. She even had Suhari summoned from elsewhere to help with the resurrections. She said the experiments were not yet finished. No doubt she would have preferred to wait until the effects of the drug were better understood before attempting this. However, circumstances left no choice but to give the children the medicine. As a result, several of them suffered side effects. Chu Yu was the last of the 5 to awaken. These children, who would have otherwise gone to the gallows with their parents, were given new names and taken in by a new home. Chu Yu remained in the pleasure district, however. He had lost his memory, for better or for worse. He was also left with mild paralysis in half of his body, but under the circumstances, one had to say he was lucky. For a while it had looked as if he might not wake up at all. No one seemed to know exactly how the children had survived, but in any case they were to go to live with the former consort duo. Some people suggested sending them to separate locations, but duo thought that would be unnecessarily cruel. Maomao was amazed when she saw the former consort. She was wearing men's clothing for some reason, but she seemed much more alive than she had been while living in the rear palace. What really startled Maomao was the former consort's resemblance to Jinchi. She did wonder if it could be so. No, no, let us drop that train of thought. Maomao forced the fantasy she had once entertained out of her mind. Our duo had taken in not just the children, but Suhari as well. Certainly she had caused some trouble in the rear palace. However, allowances could be made, considering her circumstances. Most importantly, the fact that she was descended from the former emperor spoke well for her. She would be watched closely, but her life would be spared. Chu Yu was sent to the pleasure district because it was felt that, lacking his memories, it would be best if he were raised separately from the other children. Maomao thought that could be a mess. It did not concern her, or so she believed. What was the nasty little brat doing in her shop? They had insisted it was the safest place for him, but Maomao was not sure how that could be true. The brat began to search through the medicine cabinet. Maomao gave him a solid knuckle to the head. Youch, what did you do that for? Those are not for eating, Maomao said, snatching back the packet of expensive rice crackers her sister had given her.